Thank you, Brother Rarick, for coming. Appreciate that. We would love to get your background and kind of just walk us through why you wanted to study family and what your dream's been in your career.
Well, it didn't start off that way. I barely graduated from high school because I was goofing off and playing too much. And literally barely graduated from high school. And so then I served a 2-year mission in Pittsburgh, and that set me a little bit more straight as far as regulating my life a little bit more. But I still wasn't totally healed from my adolescent stupidity, because then I started college probably almost a year after my mission, and I took 2 classes and flunked them both. Paid for it out of pocket. You'd think that'd be more incentive. You know, like, well, you paid for it. It's not the government. It's you. Now, actually, I should be more accurate. I was a F and a D minus. That's not flunking out, right?
Yeah.
F and a D minus.
I can realize that,
Yeah. And then summer came, and I got married. And this is always where people are like, "Why did your wife marry you?" Because you had no prospects. That's a whole other podcast. Leap of faith is probably the short answer. But and then I took 4 classes again that fall after I was married, and I got like a 3.9.
Okay.
So that really set me straight. I think one of the big distractions was girls, and my wife was like, "I'm the girl," and that really helped. And it helped me realize there's more to my life than just me, because now I had to take care of her and think about the future. Yeah, so I became much more future-oriented, where I think I was a bit more present-oriented. And definitely as a teenager, I was and that's, the adolescent brain is designed that way. They have to constantly fight against not being myopic and present-oriented. But when I got married, it really helped me to be future and present. I would say I bounced around between major to major, and I was thinking to myself, I want to be this, I want to be that, I want to be this. And people are asking, in my mind I was changing it every week. I took an intro to psych class, and that's when I said to myself, I want to do something with people. I don't know what it is, but understanding and being with people, I love that. So I decided maybe I'll be a psych major, and then the next semester I took a class that was about basically marital relationships and sexual development relationships, and it was taught by a marriage and family therapist. And when I took that class, I picked the MFT, marriage and family therapist, that's the shorthand. The MFT, I picked his brain after class a lot. I remember he just became a great mentor to me. And then I decided maybe I think I want to be a marriage and family therapist. Transferred to another university, University of Utah, and I liked what I kind of would call the study of the psychology of relationships. That's what really human development and family studies is. And there's a lot of, I think, ignorance about that degree in that field, even in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but in and out. A lot of ignorance. People think it's like a mommy major, and I always say, why would you talk about mommy major like in such a pejorative, demeaning way? The hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rules the world. You know what I mean? But people are like, just a mommy major. First of all, that's not true. And second of all, even if it were true, why such disdain for mothers? But I really loved that relationships. And the more I studied it, the more I realized, I think what we all intuitively understand, which is that your close relationships, your family bonds, are the ones that are the strongest predictors for your well-being, life satisfaction, and a whole myriad of outcomes, psychologically, physically. It's one of the number one predictors. In some categories, it is the number one variable. So that's one of the reasons why I went into it. Another one was I saw, I guess from a religious perspective, I knew that the family was central to the Creator's plan for the eternal destiny of His children, but I started learning from the research that the family really is the fundamental unit of society, and what it means, no matter if you're religious or not, what it means for people and creating good humans or destroying humans.
Right.
So I decided I wanted to be a marriage and family therapist, applied to grad school, went to Kansas State University, and then while I was in grad school, I started teaching early morning seminary, which gave me a teaching experience I'd never had. And then the department chair at Kansas State, I'll just use K-State for short because that's what we call, K-Staters. K-State, our department chair, he gave me an opportunity to teach a class of 500 undergraduates as a master's student. And first of all, have you ever experienced imposter syndrome?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's on steroids. 500 students, and I haven't even finished my master's degree.
You're the same age as you guys.
What's that?
You're the same age as them.
Yeah, I'm just a few years older. I mean, at that time I had 2 young children. I was married, so I guess when it comes to like late life stages, I was further along than most of them. But anyhow, that really opened my eyes to the teaching, and then I learned in my graduate degree that I liked research more than I thought. And then everybody kept saying, you should be a professor. I'm like, you don't understand, I barely graduated from high school. I shouldn't even be here. But I decided to do a PhD, and so I basically did it in marriage, family, human development all the way through. And then I came to BYU, Idaho, and one of the first classes they gave me to teach was child and family advocacy. And that class is pretty much how do you promote and protect the family using, it's evolved, I should say. It's very multidisciplinary. At first, I didn't know what it was. I didn't even study it in grad school. I just studied social science, But it's evolved, and kind of like that and the parenting class have just kind of taken over my life and my area of focus. But the advocacy class is a multidisciplinary class that is how do you promote and protect the family using political science, communications, philosophy, social science, I'm missing a few others, but it's very multidisciplinary. Sociology, which is part of the social sciences. How do you use all that to be able to promote and protect the family? And the reason why is because governments, economics, individual well-being, mental health, everything rises or falls by the strength of the family in a country. And so since then, and this is where I'll you can ask more questions if you want, but since then, that's not only taken over my life, like I've been serving as the chairman of the board for the Idaho State Department of Health and Welfare, which is all Idaho, and I'm like the District 7 board member. I've spoke at the United Nations probably 15, 20 different times on how the family is the fundamental, you didn't know that?
No, that's awesome.
I spoke at the United Nations, I'll be doing it again in a few months. I've spoken in several different countries and places. I'm not saying this to like, hey, look at all this money.
We've been involved.
I've just been involved in a lot of things. At the micro level, I try to work with a lot of parents with their children. At the macro level, I do a lot of work with government officials and nonprofits to say how can we achieve these economic, mental health, crime, delinquency. How do you achieve that through family capital? Where in business they would call it human or social capital. Family capital is a term that I and some friends, I didn't come up with it, but we kind of perpetuate at the United Nations and other places. Say if you don't have good family capital in a country, it's going to fail. Individualistic countries, we're starting to see that here in the United States, in Western Europe, in Canada, where the birth replacement rate is too low, where there's high crime rate, and it's because we're promoting these policies that are very individualistic and they're not community or family oriented. So
that's fascinating.
And I've been involved in a lot of things, but I didn't really seek them out for the most part. They found me, and I just have to go through a door when it opens, and constantly having to fight the feeling of imposter syndrome. So that's probably more than you wanted, but
that's perfect. I actually do want to talk a little bit about imposter syndrome because we've been talking a lot about mindset, and I feel like no matter how good one's intentions are, if they have that imposter syndrome or just like anxiety in general, it's like the biggest inhibitor to get started on a project or to work towards a goal. What do you think is because you just jumped into it because you kind of had the job with those 500 students. Yeah. What was your experience getting over imposter syndrome as well? It's just kind of mitigating it throughout your whole career? You've been putting such big projects.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I would say, I don't know, I'm fully over it, but I've gotten better at managing it and recognizing it more quickly. And I think that's with a lot of struggles that we all have. Do we ever just fully just overcome it? It's not like an on and off switch. I think it's more like a dimmer where you're getting better at turning on the light and turning off getting away from those dark thoughts that are defeating. So at Kansas State, one of the things I learned was I don't have to be the expert. And this took me a little bit to figure out. 500 undergraduate students. I'm 29 years old, maybe 28, because I was 28 when I finished my undergrad. I'm a little bit older. But I looked like I was 21 at the time. And the department chair says, you have to have them call you Mr. Rarick, because they couldn't have them call me Dr. Rarick. I didn't even have my master's degree. I wanted to have them call me Master Rarick, but I wasn't done, because I'd sound like a Jedi. I wasn't even done with my master's degree. So have them call you Mr. Rarick, so there's this level of respect and difference. I'm like, okay. I just felt like this made me feel even older. But I learned that I don't have to be the expert, that the textbook or the experts who write who conduct the research, who are the theorists who write these things, I just have to learn how to be expert in helping them think deeply about it. And I'm the messenger and the facilitator. I don't have to be the expert. And so then you don't have to feel so much like an imposter, because if I feel like I have to take the role of the expert, then I am an imposter. But if I have to take the role of facilitating deeper thinking and pondering and studying, and then, like for example, John Gottman, who's a marriage expert, researcher up in Seattle, he can be the expert, and I can just use his stuff. So that's one thing that's helped, is that I don't have to be the expert. And then another thing that's really helped was realizing that everybody in there has some level of expertise or experiences. I'm sure you've heard the phrase before. Assume that every person you meet knows more about something than you do. And that's true. So I guess imposter syndrome is a constant battle. To get over it, you have to get over self. And you have to get over your own pride and having a need to be seen a particular way. So, can I share one more story? So I was speaking at Princeton. I've had the opportunity to speak at Princeton twice, and this first or second time. First time I was speaking after a professor who I really revered. I've used his readings in my advocacy class, and everybody in like the pro-family movement sees him very highly. And I had to speak after him, and I was stressing and thinking, okay, I don't want it to be about me. I don't want to be so stressed. I was even praying, help me to not be about me. Mm-hmm. But as try as I might, I still couldn't get over myself. And when I spoke, I remember it took me like 30 minutes to even get into my presentation. I think it was a 45-minute, no, it was about 15. 45-minute presentation, 45-minute Q&A, and it took me about 15 minutes to get into it, because I was so like, these people were in the audience, oh my gosh. And then afterwards, I just went out, I found another building on Princeton's campus to go isolate myself, because I just had to go beat myself up, because I'm like, I had an opportunity, and I was terrible, I've done so much better. And I learned some valuable lessons from that your feelings can always be real, but they're not always truthful. In fact, they often lie to you. There was one of my BYU Idaho students who was actually there at the conference. He came up to me and he was like this. I'm like, take a baseball bat for my presentation, it was that bad? He's like, you hit it out of the park. I'm like, I could not be comforted. I would not be comforted. Kind of like, thank you, and I just kind of dismissed him, whatever. But the more I've thought about it since, and I got over myself, the more I realized I could have done so much better had I just gotten over myself and just said, is there somebody in the audience that needs to hear something? And say, forget Professor so-and-so, I'm not going to name names, Professor so-and-so and author so-and-so. I'm not here for them. I'm here for the one that needs to hear something. Even though it was all secular, they still need to hear something. And I finally did get over myself, and I had somebody email me during the Q&A, somebody asked a question about same-sex marriage. And I gave a very, I wouldn't say a diplomatic response, but recognizes both sides of the issue, and then offered some, what I thought were helpful truths about the issue, about the topic of same-sex marriage.
Sensitive, yeah.
It was sensitive, and I think it was nuanced, and I felt it was inspired, and I studied it a fair amount. And he emailed me after, he's like, that, I couldn't reconcile in my head, I needed to hear that, and I remember he started doing some pretty amazing things after that. But I would have missed that completely because I was so focused on imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
So I think I've gotten better, I'm still not there, at trying to just get over self and notice when the anxiety starts to go up. Oh, wait a minute, am I thinking about myself? Maybe this is a sign I'm thinking about me, and then just try to recenter on, okay, who is it I need to focus on? And then you don't have to worry about being the imposter or being the expert. Then you just stop worrying about yourself. That's the problem altogether.
That's true.
Anyway, I don't know if that helps.
You just service, just basically the service at the end of the day, just focus on that person.
Yeah, and oftentimes you may not see the evidence that you were able to do any good. But I love the Danish philosopher. He said his name's Søren Kierkegaard. He said something like, ours is only the trying, the rest is none of our business.
That's cool.
So you do your best, and if you don't have evidence that you're succeeding, and somebody isn't coming up and saying, oh, well, you were so powerful, good. Maybe you shouldn't hear that. So you can stop focusing on how great you were, and just be grateful that you had the opportunity to try. If something happens beyond that, it's not your business, because you can't control what people,
What they think,
yeah, I can throw a pass to somebody if they don't want to catch it, and that's not my fault. But I can control how good of a pass I throw. Yep. Give them every opportunity to catch it. If they don't catch it, then I can't be like, oh my gosh, I stink, or they suck.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Anyhow, those are my thoughts.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
How do you avoid conflict when addressing controversial issues?
Like same-sex marriage, for
Yes.
example. The United Nations, I'll just tell you, I usually am speaking at the Commission on the Status of Women, which is a hotbed for LGBTQ activists, and I would say radical feminists, because there's different waves of feminism, first, second, third, and fourth. So I don't know if avoiding conflict is the best approach. I don't think it's possible. I think in family life and in political and social issues like that are very sensitive and important, whether it's gender equality or trans rights or something else. I think if we avoid conflict, we are going to be a people pleaser, and we won't ever learn or speak truth. There's a difference between a peacekeeper and a peacemaker. And a peacekeeper is someone who's going to avoid conflict. A peacemaker is someone who's going to take the conflict and try to listen to and learn from others while discerning truth and speaking truth, even if that's just with secular words, right?
Yeah.
So avoiding conflict is, I don't think that's possible, honestly. I always tell parents and spouses, and especially on the social, political scale, conflict is inevitable, but contention is a choice. So I think we can avoid contention. We can't avoid conflict. So conflict's something that's passive, that happens to us sometimes. We don't always choose it. Sometimes it chooses us. But contention is something. Can I give you an example? I was speaking at an event, was it last year, at the United Nations? And there was like 5 panelists. It was sponsored by a few different countries. And I don't know if they want me naming. I don't think they mind. It was sponsored by Egypt. Was it Belarus? I remember it was an Eastern European country, and then one other country. It was I and 4 other people, and a lot of it had to do with parental rights. And there's a lot of people at the UN, and even in this country, and especially in very individualistic countries, you've got a clash between parental rights. It's my job to raise the child. I have the right to. And child rights, which is the child should be free to do what they want, explore what they want. And those things clash. And it becomes a false dichotomy of like, it's all or nothing.
Right.
But at the Commission on the Status of Women, there's a loud refrain, a voice of child rights should, parental rights don't matter. Child should be free from religion and parental involvement, and let just the government basically raise them. So we finished speaking on this panel, and we all had different subtopics that we spoke on. This woman in the back, during the Q&A session, sometimes they devolve from Q&A into just shouting matches. It's not as civilized sometimes as you think it would be. Sometimes it's very, professional and diplomatic, because that's what UN is like, about diplomacy. But the people who attend these events and these commissions aren't always diplomatic. So she starts yelling in the back, "You want to put the rights back in the hands of the parents? The parents are the abusers!" And my thought was, and maybe this was like my, more of my social scientist therapy training that came out. It was, well, you were probably abused by your parents, but you think the parental institution is broken because your parents are broken. But the parental institution is not broken, people are. And to cast judgment on the entire parental institution and try to take that down because of your own wounds would actually create more wounds. You're just perpetuating what I would call collusion or contention. So what helped for me in that moment was, how do I see this woman as a person who has a lot of pain, and her claims are coming from a place of probably wounds. How do I see her as somebody who has legitimate positions? Even though they may be irrational to me, she still matters. So her feelings are valid, but they're not truthful. And I don't know any research that would support her position. But I can still be compassionate and say, look, there are abusive parents out there. So this is very nuanced. You can't just be like, "You're wrong." And some of the people on my panel, they tried to do that. They just fought fire with fire. And my thought was, how about we see her as a person and ask her a question? What were your parents like? And then she would respond, well, they were this and this and this. And I could be like, "I'm sorry that happened to you. Some parents are broken, and abuse is something where at least a third of children who've been abused are going to end up abusing their children. And I want to stop the cycle of abuse as much as you do. But let's zoom out and look at what we're really claiming." So you see what I mean? I'm not trying to avoid conflict. I'm trying to use the conflict to have a productive conversation. But I have to be able to see her as somebody who has legitimacy, who matters like I matter. She gets the flu like I do. She has her favorite hobbies just like I do. She worries about her aging parents. I don't know, maybe she doesn't. You see what I mean? She has, I can relate to her at least on a humane level.
Yeah.
And that'll help me handle the conflict rather than just avoid it. I don't know, does that help answer your question?
It does.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, something you mentioned at the beginning of the semester was just like focusing, especially with children, but with anyone, on eye contact and making sure that they know that they're basically seen as a human and valid, kind of like you were talking about with that lady. And that when you look them in the eyes, it makes it impossible to dehumanize them as a person, and it makes their problems legitimate and valid. I'm sure you've seen that professionally, but also in your personal life, like what's the main focus that you have with conflict? Is like just make sure you see them as human, keep your heart at peace, or is it? I guess it would be keeping your heart at peace at all times. So.
Well, that would be, I think, my first priority, and then of course there's other things we have to do beyond that. But yeah, and I guess I would modify that. And maybe if I said in class that it's impossible to see someone as an object if you look into their eyes, I still think you can dehumanize. Yeah, if you're angry enough or your heart's hard enough, you're going to want to stay there and stay justified, because it just kind of tastes good to be like, it tastes good that they're the problem and I'm not. I don't know, whatever your favorite meal is, when it's laced with arsenic, and maybe you can't tell, it still tastes, I don't know if arsenic has taste, but we'll just pretend it doesn't. It's laced with some sort of poison, and it tastes good to feel justified and to blame the other person.
Right.
but it's slowly poisoning you and it's poisoning them, even though in the moment you get this perverse sense of satisfaction. So I can still look at somebody in the eye, and, like one of my children, and be like, they're still the problem. I just think it's a lot harder when you look them in the eye. I think you give yourself the best chance to see their humanity when you look people in the eyes. And you'll notice when people are arguing, they often are looking around the person, but not right to the eyes. And they'll often be doing this and this and then glance up at them. And if they do look at them, maybe they're looking at the chin, at the forehead. It's almost as if I have to keep dehumanizing them in order to see them as the enemy. Because if I see them as something other than the enemy, then I could be wrong about something. I just can't have that.
Yeah.
I just can't have that. This is not a real life example, but I think it's an illustration of real life relationships. Have you ever seen Captain America, Winter Soldier? No, not Winter Soldier. Civil War.
Yeah.
This is when, if you haven't seen it, for those of you who are watching this,
Good movie.
it's a good movie, and if you haven't seen it yet, I'm going to spoil it, and you deserve it to be spoiled, because you've had plenty of time to watch it. It's been out for like, I don't know, 8 years,
Wow.
maybe 9 years. So what happens is Captain America is basically pitted against Iron Man, and they have two ideological positions. Actually, the UN is part of that, but we won't get into that. But there's a scene at the end of the movie. We find out that the Winter Soldier, Bucky Barnes, who is Captain America's best friend, and Bucky Barnes has finally been deprogrammed from his brainwashing from the Nazis, basically Hydra. It wasn't the Nazis, it was Hydra. And while he was